Okay, so I'm often asked, hey, what can I use from one generation to the other when it comes to the ProDesks and the EliteDesks? Can I use a fan from a G2 on a G4? And hey, what can I do about heat sinks? And are ProDesks and EliteDesks similar enough, etc. So I thought I'd do a segment kind of talking about what can be reused and transferred from unit to unit, particularly because I'm doing it all the time when I'm setting up my videos, when I'm doing experimentation. So today I'm going to focus on those that are the generations from the G1 through the G5. And because really the G5 and the G4 are pretty much identical units. Basic rule when it comes to reusability is the more generic, the more you can reuse it from generation to generation. But I do want to kind of point out a few things and kind of go from the most general to the most specific, so that way you can get a sense of what is changeable and what is reusable from generation to generation. Okay, so let's start with something that's maybe people don't think about too much: Wi-Fi cards. So these A&E slot Wi-Fi cards you can use on all the generations, and they'll work, even within a generation. Obviously there's a lot of different speeds. Some of the earlier ones may or may not have both antenna. I will take faster ones and put them on older units. So that's one case where something goes from, across the generations. The next would be something like your SATA drives. These will work on all the various generations. Connect up, you're ready to go. Your M.2 will also work on all generations. If you want an M.2 to be able to boot on a G1, you're going to have to watch my video on how to hack the BIOS a little bit so that it can support NVMe M.2 booting. But as far as it fitting in there, it's going to work in all 5 generations. I really like the 2230s. These will work if you get something like an extender and you can get them to work on a G1, G2. G3, they're native. They're awesome. They fit right in here. This is a G3 that I'm looking at right here. Goes right in, screws right in. It's perfect. For some reason on the G4, they left the holes there, but you have to find really weird size screws in order to fit them in there. You can fit two. There's slots for 2 of them and will fit, but as far as the 2230s, they're not quite as universal as the 2280s. Unfortunately, the other sizes, you're going to have to definitely get some sort of extender, like if you want to do a 2242 or a 2260. So that's something that goes across. Memory. Now, the G2, G3, G4, G5 all use DDR4. And depending on the processor, they'll support different, speeds, higher speeds, and so forth. Pretty much, though, if you can get the 2400 megahertz, the G1s will use the DDR3. So, of course, you can't use your DDR3 in your later generations. So that's one instance in which it's not as much being able to, go from generation to generation. Now, another thing that is sort of universal is they all use the T15 bit for a lot of their screws. So if you're looking to buy something, get a T15 and you'll be able to work on all those various units. The other thing that's very universal are the power supplies. Make sure you get genuine HP, but the HP 65 watt will work on all 5 generations. So it's a nice thing, because if you're going to spend the money, and especially if you see a deal where you can get, 5 or 6 of them, you might as well go ahead. That's what I did. I got these much smaller ones, which I've been using on some of my units, and a seller had like, I don't know, 6 of them in a batch, and or a lot, and it was cheaper almost than buying one of them. So that's one thing that's very universal. The other thing that is kind of cross-generational are the Flex IO, the very simple Flex IOs, which would be something like the VGA, HDMI. Those you can use on the G3, 4, and 5. G2 had its own kind of look. G1 didn't have any. So as far as investing in those, some of them you can get to work on that are deemed as being only for G4, G5. You can get to work on the G3. Check out my other videos that talk about especially the USB-C and what you can do with those. Okay, so CPUs. If I have a 6500T, I can use that on a G2 or a G3. So that's kind of nice. The G4s and 5s, with those, they can both use like the 8th gen and the 9th gen, actually. The G2s cannot use the 7th gen, although the G3s can. So just so you know, so if you go with anything that's the lower, so the 2s and 3s are similar, and the 4s and 5s as far as generations, as long as you use the lower end CPUs, you'll be fine. The G1s, the 4th gen, only work with the G1s. Heat sinks only fit within the same generation, meaning if you have G3, you can then move it between, let's say, an EliteDesk 800 with a ProDesk 400 and 600. You can even swap. Sometimes you'll, of course, see the copper versus the aluminum. This is the aluminum. This is what you would find on your 35-watt units. The 65-watt units are going to have your copper. Fans only work, again, within a given generation. I cannot take this G3 fan and have it fit in a G4 or a G2. It's just not going to work. I don't know why they made these so different, especially the heat sinks and the other. I think it's just as they tried to move stuff around, perhaps they were experimenting with what space they could fit in here for the Flex IO. It would have been nice if they were a little more consistent as far as, from generation to generation, so you could reuse them. Let's talk about the case. So the cases, again, are specific to the generation, but if you go with the EliteDesk 800 and the ProDesk 600, you can generally swap. I could take this, which is a ProDesk 600 G3 top, and I can put it on an EliteDesk without a problem. Same as the bottom, it would also fit. The 400s are very different beasts. The pinouts on the front, or I should say, as far as the types of options on the front are different. Options on the back are different. So you can't swap and do stuff with the 400 other than perhaps should be okay on fans and heat sinks, because those they seem to keep, but everything else they changed. Motherboards between the ProDesk 600 and EliteDesk 800, as long as everything else is the same, those should fit. You are going to lose some functionality. As an example, this is a ProDesk motherboard. It does not have on here the fan connector that's used on the EliteDesk 65-watt units, because there's got a fan in the actual caddy, and there's no way to connect it there. But if you were trying to do some swapping, or you had, let's say, a parts only, and you wanted to kind of mix and match cases, you could probably get away with it without a problem. Caddies are very specific to the generation. You cannot swap caddies. You can't take a G3 and put it in a 4 and a 2 and a 3, etc. And I do have some videos where I go very, very in depth on heat sinks, fans, and caddies. So please check those out. But if you, a lot of times when you're shopping and you're on eBay and it may say something like, oh, well, this is a ProDesk 600 G3 caddy. Well, and you've got a EliteDesk, 800. Go ahead, you can buy it. I mean, the sellers don't always know all the permutations for these things, and these caddies, like this one, is already set to even take an additional fan. You just take out these two screws here, and then you can put in the fan. I neglected to mention the AMD units, the 705s. That's another area where things are very different as far as what will swap. Particularly, let's say in the case if I have a G3, a 705 G3, it looks more like a EliteDesk G2. So parts there, good luck as far as being able to swap out. 705s, of course, can use the same Wi-Fi and SATA and M.2s, so you don't have to worry about those, and also, of course, memory. So hopefully this will give you some sense of what can I do when I'm out there and I'm looking for parts and I see a good deal. What can I reuse? Again, in general, if you stay within the same generation, you should be fine.